The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
Hey, Seach. You doing okay? It's been a couple days, but tough way to end for your boys. Game 7, an epic Game 7, but yeah, that was a tough one to end.
Yeah, you can't imagine losing a game in quite that way, but I have to say, I'm feeling pretty positive about things, all things considered. Obviously, kind of volleying between the two thoughts, and I'm sure lots of Jays fans are like this. I don't think this is unique even because I was at the game or anything like that, but going between playing through all the little things that could have went a different way that would almost certainly have led to a more positive outcome for those of us who care with the Jays, but then, eventually landing back on how cool this time was, how special the run was, how special the team was to those of us that, got behind them. And, I was even thinking like there was a whole bunch of friends of mine that for one reason or another, I hadn't been as good at touch with. And during the last month, we were texting 30 times a day in some cases, about every little thing with this team. I mean, I do think the Jays brought a lot of people together. It can be strangers too. Cause I'll tell you, there was a great vibe around the Rogers Center, leading up to Game 7 and during the game, people are more friendly. Everyone's commiserating over it, but it's also even just with, your own friends and family. I got to take my dad to a game. So I'm actually probably doing a little better than you might have guessed just because of the nature of the loss. I mean, look, all the obvious is the obvious. Like I have no idea if they'll get back there. Certainly feel like there's lots of good pieces on a team, but a lot came together to have that kind of season and quite that's an epic loss. Like you can't even add up the number of ways that could have went the other way. I mean, literally a coin flip series right down to the last at bat. And unfortunately for the Jays, they were on the wrong side of that coin flip. And, this has given Toronto 30 years worth of coulda, woulda, shouldas, whether you want to even go back to Game 6 and the Barger ball into the wall or, the whole list. I mean, you got a lead in the top of the ninth. You got a bases loaded with one out in the bottom of the ninth.
Two outs away, man.
You got Zapruder footage of Will Smith's foot. Like, was it on the plate or not on the force out at home? We've got people breaking down the IKF lead or lack thereof before that play. I mean, you still got into the 11th, even after giving up the third solo homer, and Vladdy has a leadoff double. You get him over to third base and don't find a way to get him in. So, and look, you can go through Game 6. We could go all the way back to the 18th inning, Game 3. I mean, the point is, this has given you ample opportunity. I mean, people in this part still talk fondly about the 1993 Toronto Maple Leafs, and they had a missed high stick call in Game 6 of the semifinals and still lost to Game 7. This is the world's this is brand new material for those that just want to heard about something for about 3 decades, give or take.
As far as I'm concerned, and I understand that for what I'm about to say, I'm not a Jays fan. That was the most painful loss I've ever witnessed for a team within the last almost decade. If you want to start thinking of other painful losses in sports history, like 28-3 with the Atlanta Falcons, and put that on the same pedestal, I'm not going to stop you. But just the opportunities the Blue Jays had to win that series from home field advantage on to the ball under the wall, the double plays to end Game 6 and 7, the IKF shortened lead, just pain. And I admire the fact that you are taking this as positively as you are, because as an outsider, like, I think that's just so tough to come back from a moment like that. Like, you saw all the reactions from those Jays players in the clubhouse afterwards. Like, that was an emotional end. Those guys obviously want that ride to end positively, but I mean, that was as heartbreaking of a loss as any sports fan could endure if you're a fan of the Blue Jays.
Yeah, I feel the worst for the players. Like, I actually think just because there's so many that, like any team that have free agents, they're not going to get to recreate this in any way, shape, or form. Not that I feel great for the fans, but it's the players who put everything into it. I still think this is sports, man. Like, the reason why I got to a more positive place, I wasn't feeling that way Saturday night / early Sunday morning. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I was at the game. It was pure agony. I mean, I'll be honest too. I thought they were going to win. I mean, I just believed in the team so much. They showed up for the game 7. You get the Bo Bichette home run. I mean, it just didn't occur to me they weren't going to win. Even when things were starting to spiral in hindsight, I wasn't nearly as worried as you would have thought. Like, if you were sitting with me in the 9th, even when the Dodgers tied it up, I was thinking, well, the Jays are going to go out and win. And they went out and loaded the bases. Like, honestly, watching game 6, even after the Barger thing goes under the wall and they're on 2nd and 3rd and they're down by 2 in the 9th, I was thinking they're going to come back. They're going to win the World Series right here.
Yep.
Just because of the kind of team they were. So it was, obviously then a little stunning almost, even though that's the cool thing about baseball. It happens slowly, but it also happens fast at the same time. Like, concurrently, two things are true. It took a, bit of time to play the 9th, 10th, and 11th inning, and it had all kinds of drama in it and back and forth. I mean, I wasn't thinking this in real time, buddy, but reading some of the stories, this might have been one of the all-time baseball games. Yes. It's funny because when you're living it as a fan, I mean, I was not viewing it through that prism, but I'm also not taking any umbrage with that characterization by the reporters or by some of the players that were talking like that. I mean, it's just so much back and forth and tension, and you're not guaranteed. The point is this: everyone knows this intuitively. You're not guaranteed a good outcome when you care about a team, right? Like, when you ask the fans at Edmonton about the ride that they've been on the last 2 springs, right? And they are so damn close to having at least 1 cup, if not 2. Now that being said, of course, Florida full marks for the 2 wins they have. But I'm just saying, if you're viewing it through the Oilers prism, if you're living and dying with that team, if you're spending every waking hour for 2 months going through the joyride of the playoffs and some of the heartbreak, I mean, sports makes us feel something, but doesn't tell you what the feeling's going to be, right? It doesn't promise you it's a happy one. I think where the happiness comes from, as I mentioned, is so many good things came out of the last few months for me. And I think I'm far from alone, judging by my timeline. I did have a hard time. I'm almost getting annoyed with Instagram because it's everybody I follow and follows me, and I'm one of them, is in mourning at the same time. It's I can't see anymore. It's we have to move forward. That loss will stick with people forever. That's just the way it is. You lose a game in that manner, there's no way around it. Statistically, how it felt, everything, every way you could look at this, whether you're going with your heart or your mind, that should have been in a lot of ways a Jays World Series win, but it wasn't. And credit to the Dodgers. I mean, they have some ridiculously high end performers. They found a way to get it done. Quite frankly, I'm in the camp that I don't think they were the better team, but they were better in the moment, right? They got the clutch hits. They got the pitching performance he did from Yamamoto. Ohtani didn't maybe register in the final game like you'd expect, but he did also have a game in the series where he was on base 9 times. So they just had a lot of, they just found a way, which I think great teams do. It's not like great teams outperform you every single night in terms of, in every possible facet, but they find a way, and the Dodgers found a way to get 1 more run. And in fact, they had 8 fewer runs in the series total, but they got 1 more run when it mattered in game 7.
Okay, before we get off of the Blue Jays, because I know we've been sad for the last couple moments, let's at least end on a positive with talking about them, because watching that playoff run from beginning to end, even if it didn't end the way most people would have wanted, that was still an amazing thrill ride, one of the most fun experiences I've ever had as a baseball fan following a team. I think that's the greatest World Series I've ever seen from start to finish. I mean, the fact that you were able to attend games in person, I will always be jealous of you for the fact that you got to witness greatness live.
There was some good and bad in that.
For sure, but you got to see it.
Yeah, of course.
And that game 7, that I know, that game 7, though, the home runs, the defense, the pitching performances. Yoshinobu Yamamoto deserving of World Series MVP. Look, I get it. Not ending in the way you would want as a Jays fan. But the fact that we were able to lay witness to baseball at its peak, this is why people love that sport. I get people look at it in the regular season. They're like, why would you follow a team for 162 games? But playoff baseball is some of the most incredible. It's one of the most incredible things you could ever witness. And I'm just glad that the world over was able to appreciate the sport for what it is, especially in that series. I just thought it was amazing television. And if you're able to watch it live, all the better to you for being able to take in that experience. And you're right, it did bring so many people together, not just in baseball, but all across the sporting world. I mean, I'll eventually segue to it. I mean, you even had NHL players and NHL teams airing games in the middle of NHL games. Like, this was something that wrapped up so many people across the sporting world.
Well, it took over a country, for sure. And that's not to say every last person in Canada was totally glued to it, because I'm not naive. But, this is the first month of the NHL season. It kind of coincided with the Jays. And in a lot of markets, it almost feels like, okay, now the season just begins now. Honestly, this is what a lot of American markets, feel like in terms of, say, when the NFL team, finally gets beaten out, which I realize is a lot later. But, there's a lot of NHL markets, and this is where the debate has been about when to start the season, where the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks, just it's hard to generate a lot of interest. That's kind of weirdly in Canada what it was like. Now, there's always interest, but you got the fans that, out in Edmonton on Saturday night, like Connor McDavid spoke about it, how weird it felt. And, I just think back to the home opener that I was at with the Leafs and Canadians, and that was the night the Jays beat out the Yankees in the ALDS. And the whole, like, people were cheering during the game at random points. Like, it just, anyway, that doesn't happen every year, right? That it happens, quite frankly, because it's been so long since the Jays had a run like this. And then I think because how the team connected. So, well, now we're on to hockey season, buddy. We're back to being a hockey podcast.
I know. But I'm going to miss the Jay fan reactions, man. I really, it was really cool for those.
I gained a new respect for the real fans out there, and like Steve Dangle, our friends, because when you're like, I was irrational, like I was irrationally involved, wrapped up in this whole thing. I'm back to being rational, quite honestly. Like, after, give me 2 nights to sleep on it, and I'm looking at the positives, and like, I'm back to just seeing things the way I normally do. But I mean, I just love. Sports can take that. This is what it's all about, frankly, is sports can just take you places. They can make you feel things. They bring you together with people. It's crazy. Like, on paper, we shouldn't care, right? Like, there's a world where you just go like, yeah, well, it's just games, and it is just games. And that's, I think, why I get back to being rational eventually. But in the moment, I'd invested a lot. The city had invested a lot. I mean, there's like kids crying on the subway ride home the other night. Like,
oh man!
But like, what else? There's very few other things and most of them are really bad. So let's not even consider what they are. That sparked that kind of general reaction in a city. So and across the country in this case. So, I mean, it's pretty special, all things considered. But man, that's what could have been for the ages.
Yeah. How do you think the city of Toronto is going to handle the fact that they have to direct all of their attention now to the Leafs and the Raptors? We're not an NBA pod, so we don't have to focus on the Raptors start, but we've made a bit of the Leafs start to their season.
Yeah, I mean, they had a good win on Saturday night. Again, probably most of the people locked in on the Jays didn't get a chance to watch much of it if they're just flipping back and forth. But this is that would be the normal standard operating procedure at this time that the Leafs would be locked in on. They've kind of had a scrambly start, obviously, but they have had that in the past. I mean, I think that's kind of where. Just curious to see if they can string together a big November. That has weirdly been one of their hallmarks. I don't know why these sort of patterns would persist, but both the Leafs and the Oilers, like, I see them in the same vein because both teams have done this. The Oilers have had even much more successful rallies and playing through the playoffs in the end. But, the Leafs won the division last year after being about 500 through a similar, stretch of the schedule. So I think that, it's going to be different. It starts Monday night. The Pittsburgh Penguins are in town. Pittsburgh's been one of the early, positive stories of the season. You've got Crosby in the building. I think the lights go right back up for the Leafs immediately. And I think I know they've appreciated their window of maybe flying below the radar. Well, they figured some things out. I'm not saying everything's solved, but they did have a nice bounce back win in Philadelphia on Saturday night, and getting a little healthier. Scott Laughton's on the verge of returning to the lineup. Joseph Wall's working his way back. There's some things happening behind the scenes, I think, that they can feel good about. The best players got to play a little better, and you saw some of that from Austin Matthews on Saturday as well.
You mentioned being under the lights. It's also an Amazon game too, so 7:30 start for there. Do you have an update on Chris Tanev? A pretty scary moment involving him after a collision against the Flyers on Saturday. Who knows? He went to hospital. Anything else you can give on that?
Yeah, he spent the night in hospital and was discharged on Sunday morning and made his way back to Toronto. So, pretty scary situation, obviously, for him. He just returned from a head-related injury. Don't know much about the nature of it. I don't know that it's necessarily a concussion, but, obviously, whether it's head or neck, these things are so tied together. So want to be sensitive in how we look at that. But, the fact that he was held back as a precaution and released from hospital the next morning is an encouraging sign. But, the Leafs will obviously take a lot of care with his return. And so we don't really have anything in terms of, firm, return to play kind of timelines. I think with those sorts of injuries in general too, the fact of the matter is you take your time, you wait till the player's feeling well, you get his fitness back up and he returns. So, it's a bit of tough start to the year for Tanev, missing those stretch of games, but, is never good when a stretcher's on the ice at an NHL game.
Yeah.
Your mind always jumps to something that could be much, much worse. And at least the early indication so far is it's, a little bit more of a positive outcome so far for Tanev.
Yeah. Thanks for that. One idea I wanted to get to on the CJ show. Sometimes when we do Ask CJ, which we're going to do obviously because it's a Monday show, sometimes you get a really cool idea from someone who suggests something in the comments. Shout out to Not an Accountant on Discord, who put this in the podcast questions Discord, which, by the way, if you're not on the SDPN Discord, you should join that. They want a Canadian NHL team's power rankings. Do you feel equipped to rank the 7 best? Well, there's only 7. Rank them from 1 to 7 in terms of Canadian NHL teams right now, according to you, CJ.
I do. I actually don't think this is as hard of exercise as it might be later on. Just because there's been a clear division for me. There's sort of clear separation, both positive and negative, among the Canadian teams. Like, you have to start with Winnipeg. I don't even think you're going to push back on that. Even as great as the Montreal Canadian start has been, the Winnipeg Jets coming off a President's Trophy season with a goaltender that won the Hart Trophy and the Vezina last year, that has had to play without its captain, Adam Lowry, to this stage of the year, although that's about to change because he's on the verge of return after off-season hip surgery, and they're right back where they were last year in the regular season, right near the top of the standings. To me, in the moment, they're the best combination of a team I could still see, having a tremendous second, like later part of the season, but also has taken care of business in the early part of the schedule. It hasn't all been because, every single player is healthy or they're exactly where they need to be. They've incorporated Jonathan Toews into their lineup, obviously. And while I think that's to some degree a work in progress, he looks like an NHL player, which is maybe was a question mark as the year began, just because of how long and how frequent his absences have been from the NHL in recent years. So, to me, the Jets they get the gold standard if we're moving the pieces around. I don't know what you win for being tops in the Canadian power rankings after almost a month. But it beats the alternative. And there was a lot of people, remember, forecasting maybe the Jets take a step back early, with that Lowry injury as they find themselves. And no, they've mean, Mark Scheifele's right at the top of the scoring list. I mean, there's just the list of positives for that team is long. I mean, I believe they have the NHL's best goal differential as well. So, the Jets are my number one.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the Canadians, they're equal on, it's funny I said evil. They're equal on points.
Freudian slip.
Very
from the
much
Ottawa
a
Senators beat reporter.
I know Leafs fans are going to love that too. Both have 9-3 records. But I'm very curious if you still have the Canadians second on that list. Do you have them lower? Do you believe in their start? Where do you slot them?
I've got them second. Obviously,
Okay.
I considered it because, I'm not here to poke any holes in any team, but there's some aspects of the Canadian start, be it a lot of games going to extra time, a lot of great comeback victories, which is, the positive side of that is you're winning games. The negative side is I think some people could look at it and say, can you keep it up? Obviously being buoyed, primarily by one scoring line, which is, to be fair, exactly what was expected of the Habs entering the season. I think it's not a secret. They're going to try to change that as the year goes along, but they kind of are what you thought they were, getting some really exciting performances. Ivan Demidov over the weekend obviously scores a late goal to tie it. And he's, kind of delivered, I'd say, to this stage of the season on the promise he started it with. So there's lots of good things happening in Montreal. I mean, the vibes are high. The points are in the bank. It is what it is. But, I do wonder, can it be sustainable? I mean, I think it can. I mean, not everything is the numbers, right? Like the numbers help us. They help us understand what might be happening. They help us sometimes predict a team. Hey, maybe they're flying a little too high and they're going to come this way, or maybe a lot's going right under the hood, but they're losing games, but they're poised to win more. I mean, but the other part of it is the Canadians have game breakers, right? Yep. And they have players that help you win a game on nights maybe when you don't have the best as a team. A little bit what I was talking about with the Dodgers there in the World Series. And that's a special sauce. I mean, that has been the recipe a lot of teams have put together to have teams that ultimately win Stanley Cups. I mean, the best teams of any era, again, they're not outplaying their opponents every single night. They're not, controlling 60% of the shots or the expected goals. Obviously you want to do that. I mean, that's each team's aim is to be playing more offense and defense, to be controlling the pace and flow of the game, to be dictating the terms, but it's not always going to go that way. And you still got to find ways to win on nights that it doesn't. Usually it's goaltending that helps you do that. Ironically, Canadians not necessarily getting great goaltending to this stage.
No.
So, I think you could forecast maybe that could improve. I mean, we'll see. Anyway, add it all together. Who else was I going to maybe put above them? Edmonton would probably be.
I wondered, if you were going to give them that. I put the Edmonton Oilers in this category where the regular season doesn't matter that much to them, but because of the reigning Western Conference champions, I wondered if they were going to get that respect. Yeah,
and they just don't for me because we're grading the start of the season. This is not a predictive model. This is not saying this is what I think that the exact 7 rankings would be. Going into the playoffs, because, the truth is we have to see a lot more things happen and judge the moves and the progression of players and all those things. So, yeah, I think for me, Montreal is actually a fairly easy second because, they've had a much better start than Edmonton, right? I mean, Edmonton and Toronto actually, ironically, as of this moment, have the exact same record. They have similar sort of, if you just look right across the columns, just the ones NHL's list there, goals for, goals against, regulation and overtime wins. I mean, basically have the same teams. Now I'm going to put Edmonton above the Leafs because Edmonton's Edmonton. They were combined 3 losses short of winning the last 2 Stanley Cups. And they are a team that's had their own sort of struggles early in the year. And then they go into beast mode typically and have gone on great, storied playoff runs. I mean, they haven't had the best to this stage of players like Connor McDavid. I mean, I think Evan Bouchard speaks for itself. He's been the subject of a lot of focus there because of some turnovers and just puck management issues that have plagued them. And still, all that being said, they're in there around 500, and I think in well positioned to just get a little hot right now, and all of a sudden you're going to say, oh, what was anyone even freaking out about with the Oilers? I mean, that's that's kind of who they've been. This is why the exercise isn't that hard, because I haven't had to wrestle with much. I mean, for me, I then go to Toronto, believe it or not. I guess we could do a Toronto Ottawa thing. Like to me, we know that the Calgary Flames are going to be last year.
Yeah, I think that's pretty obvious.
Right. Vancouver, a lot of injuries have contributed to their spot in the standings, and credit to them because they've kind of hung in and kept it around 500 despite, the holes that they're dealing with in their lineup. But, I still think, well, it's easy and popular to have Leafs hot takes. I mean, the fact remains they have the NHL's longest playoff run in terms of years made to playoffs. It hasn't looked good on a lot of nights, but I still think that they've earned some benefit of some doubt for their own sluggish starts in the way that they've been able to come out of them as a team. There's been no continuity in their lineup. I mean, it's literally been like rearrange the pieces every night in terms of who's playing with whom and how the lines look. I think that's going to come. I mean, naturally, as every coaching staff is going to find some lines they trust. I mean, I suppose injuries and things are always cropping up, but I just think there's going to be more stability there. I can't see it as anything but a positive that Joseph Woll is working his way back to eventually joining the Leafs lineup. So I slot the Leafs in a little bit ahead of Ottawa because I think the Senators still have a little bit to prove. I mean, they had a great year last year and they made the playoffs, and there's tons of players with promise. They've had to play this stretch, a lot of it without Brady Tkachuk, which is not nothing. Both, for his emotional and kind of just a driver of their team. They've played it with Linus Ullmark, performing among the goalies you don't want to see him with through it. Again, admittedly, small sample size of games, but if you look at stats like goals saved above expected, it's not going very well for Linus to start this year. And yet, despite that, they're right there in the mix in a similar spot in the standings as the Leafs and Oilers. And frankly, the Canucks. Those teams are pretty bundled together. But I need to see, for me, I almost give Edmonton and Toronto get a little bit more sort of bonus points just because they've done it year after year after year. The Sens, it's like, I don't know. Can they survive a year where the goaltending maybe takes a big dip? Like, I'm not saying they can't, but I haven't seen it. Right. And so many pucks that go in the net in Ottawa. I mean, it's not all on goaltending. I mean, it's penalty kill. It's defensive play. It's a team game still, but they're going to have to they're either going to have to stop that or overcome that. There's only two ways that this can end in a more successful, next phase of the schedule for the Senators is they either allow less goals against or they're scoring more. So just a little bit, the jury's more out there for me. And then we get to Vancouver, and then we get to Calgary. Two teams last year that missed the playoffs, the Canucks and the Flames. I haven't seen enough from either to believe that won't be the case again. Now Vancouver's well within what we would call a playoff race. I mean, the Western Conference doesn't appear to be as strong top to bottom as the East. Or the East, I don't know if it's strong, but the East certainly has a lot more parity. That P word that I kind of loathe, but does actually describe correctly what's going on here.
Yes.
And obviously Calgary, I think that they're at the point, honestly, it's like they could win 7 in a row from here and still be in a tough spot. And you don't believe they could get out of the hole. You don't think they could get out of the hole they're in. Well, look, I don't believe it. No, but it doesn't mean they can't. It doesn't matter what I think really. They won a game in Philadelphia themselves on Sunday. A couple goals from Jonathan Huberdeau. Maybe that 7-game win streak starts at 1 right there. I mean, who's to say? But if we're ranking the teams right now, I mean, it's pretty easy and obvious to have them in number 7 among the Canadian teams.
You mentioned the Senators in terms of, if they're not getting enough good goaltending in terms of goals allowed, they're going to have to score more. We're talking about a team that is first currently in the NHL in goals and second in terms of most goals allowed. It's like they're trying to accommodate with those goals. It's just Linus Ullmark just has not been good enough to start this season. I can understand why you've slotted the teams as they are. I think if Linus Ullmark was even just like a percentage better, I would put they could even be top three in the they could be even be top three in your power rankings. I think they'd be a lot better than what they look like right now. But just goaltending just hasn't been good enough.
Right, but there's no guarantee he will be. I mean, he's got a long track record of success in the league. But you know, I it's one of those things. I still remember when it was like day 2 or 3 at training camp, and he's like, "I sucked today," or whatever he said.
I remember that too. I was there.
But you know, okay, so and we did highlight it at the time. We had to talk about something. We were at that point of the podcast calendar.
It was definitely something we could not ignore. Like that's pretty jarring to hear. Like 2-3 days into camp. But
I mean, if you're stringing together, he's been fighting it a little bit. Like I think it's just fair to say that and you know, when you've had the career he's had, I think there's obviously a lot of positives he can look back on and things there's a lot of reason for him to believe he's going to come out of it. And frankly, for the Senators to believe that, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And I think the spirit of what we're talking about is really, you know, who is the best teams in this moment. And I don't have faith. I don't have full faith it's going to turn. And it's really hard to overcome the kind of goaltending they've received. It's just at the end of the day that most teams that make the playoffs or have any amount of success, the goalie's got to be a big part of that formula. And right now it's, you know, it has been a difficult month keeping the puck out of the net for the Senators.
The only thing I'll say to that is his stats around this time last year weren't that great. They look worse now than they were last year. And then he found a way to go on a run in December where he was like the second best goalie behind Jacob Markstrom that month. There is a world where Linus Ullmark can turn his game around. He just has to do it. Because right now, I can understand why, not just you, a lot of fans in Ottawa and even people around the league might not have that confidence in him. I totally think it's justified. But I think
this is also a very early ranking of teams. Like, let's be fair, but what the exercise was, right? Like, I will be more than happy to put the Senators up at 2 or 3 if we do this in a month's time. Like, this is not crystallized. This is just how I see it starting the season, like through 4 weeks of play or whatever we're at.
One other question, not to jump back up into some of the teams you mentioned at the top. The Montreal Canadiens being a one-line team. Like, getting to watch them over the weekend, I saw the talent and seeing guys like Ivan Demidov play well. They have the game breakers. How much does them adding a second-line center, as has been rumored, how much does that change the look of this team? Obviously, it depends on who they might add, but that's going to be a massive talking point up until the deadline this year, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it depends who they add, and then how well does that person fit in? I mean, it's like a nice way to escape the question, but you know, we don't always know. I mean, even the Brad Marchand deal last year for Florida, which obviously in hindsight was extremely impactful on their second straight Stanley Cup win. I'm not sure you and I came out of our first show after the trade deadline going, that's going to be the deal that we talk about that changes the complexion of this 24-25 season. I think the Canadians are going to look to make that kind of trade at some point here in the next few months for their team. But, you know, there's some unknowns there. You know, and I'm not going to say they're only a one-line team, but they're driven by one line to a degree that could be concerning unless that line keeps doing it. I mean, lots of teams do this. I mean, let's face it. We live in an NHL world that every team feels like it doesn't have enough top end talent. Even the best teams wouldn't mind a little bit more. I mean, that's even behind Florida's decision to trade for a guy like Marchand, right? I mean, that's them chasing a player with a long resume of success, to improve what was already a team that had won the previous year's Stanley Cup. So, yeah, it's a big story and will be a big story. And I think will, you know, ultimately dictate what Montreal can do even once we talk about playoffs. I mean, but right now what they've got is working, and I don't want to poke too many holes in successful teams. I really don't. Like, I don't want to sit here and list all the things that aren't perfect, because I don't think there's a perfect team out there, and they do deserve credit. Like, they clearly have a spirit where they've managed to come back in games, right? Like they have a little bit of maybe what I loved about the Blue Jays this season. They have a little bit of not, you know, in the face of things that aren't going their way, they don't back down. They keep pushing. They still have belief they're going to score. You know, Cole Caulfield's up to 10 goals, I believe. I mean, they have a little bit of the je ne sais quoi, my friend, that, you know, you can't totally ignore, but then you also can't say like, well, is that going to last forever? I mean, that I land somewhere in the middle of those two things, but they're just, it's a young roster too. I think second youngest in the league. The fact they're having that kind of success, like to me, all the signs are extremely positive in Montreal. And, Winnipeg is a more mature team. They're further along. They're in their window where they're trying to win right now. And they've been winning a lot out of the gate. But, basically I would say it's up to teams 1, 2, or 3 to end this cup drought that Canada's had that goes back a long, long way. We'll see if the Leafs can get in that conversation. They were the number 4 team in the rankings. And obviously the Sens at number 5 wanted to be there eventually as well. But I think, reasonably speaking, based on what we've seen so far, Edmonton's still included because of what they've done. Montreal's clearly on the upswing and perhaps on a really, really exciting trajectory. And the Jets are there too.
A worthwhile exercise. So we appreciate the suggestion and question for Ask CJ. I'll keep it going here from the Fighting Mongoose. You knew these questions about trades would be coming. Do you think there could be some early season trades this year, or will we have to wait till closer to the trade deadline? We just want these trades, CJ.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I've sensed that there's more discussion getting going around the league the last, I'll call it like week or 10 days. That doesn't always produce results, but you at least need teams that feel they have needs and teams that feel they have players that they might look to move. And you need those discussions happening, generally speaking, to stoke the trade market. You did have the Reichel deal to Vancouver under those kind of circumstances when the Canucks just felt like they had to get a live body, a forward in there to help their team. And so some of that is coming, but I mean, I do think November is going to include a little bit more action, but I have no reason at this point in time to think that we got a bunch of fireworks coming. We still have the UFA market is getting weaker even since our last show. I know we focus on that then. I mean, Jacob Markstrom, as I did just mention on that show, but formally signs his 2-year deal over the weekend, $6 million per season. There's another goalie off the market. I mean, trades are going to have to be a way to solve problems for teams or for ways to get better. I mean, I know we're a long way from 2026 free agency, but the fact remains there's not a lot there. And so I'm hoping that can prompt some trade activity. The sort of trades that typically get made during the season, though, are all about addressing issues of the moment, and either for a team trying to bolster up for a stronger run or filling a lineup need or what have you. But it's a long way of saying not overly optimistic that the dam is going to break anytime soon, but sometimes it just takes one thing happening. There can be trickle down effects. So, we do know U.S. Thanksgiving seems to be this mythical day on the NHL calendar, and we're getting closer and closer to that.
Any extra thoughts you want to add on that Jacob Markstrom contract extension, by the way, that 2-year extension signed over the weekend for $12 million?
Makes a lot of sense. The Devils are in a window where they're trying to win. I think it's been a nice fit there for Markstrom. They've also got Jake Allen signed and 2 veteran guys, but they've been able to produce pretty strong results. And furthermore, and I know Nico Dawes is in their system, and you're always wondering about the younger goaltenders coming up and taking a spot. If you're a team like the Devils, you have to look ahead to next summer and go, okay, if we weren't re-signing Jacob Markstrom, if you're doing this exercise, who might we be getting to feel better about our goaltending heading into the following season? And right now, who would that be? I mean, there's no goaltenders out there that have a proven track record that would be UFAs that you could still think can carry the load even for 40 games, really. I mean, maybe someone like Frederik Andersen, I suppose, but obviously Freddie's dealt with a ton of injuries and there's no guarantee he's leaving Carolina anyway. I mean, he's just signing 1-year deals as they go there, so, I mean, it just right now, I felt like the Devils almost had no choice. And, they gave up, a fair bit in a trade to get Markstrom. It's been a good fit. It's a totally sensible contract. And, he's 35 years old. So, the term was always going to be the kind of the thing. You're not signing someone at that age to a 4 or 5 year deal as a goaltender, but, getting the extension at 2 years is something I think worked well for the player and for the team.
From Matthew, hi CJ and Julian. When will Coburg Papa be a guest on the podcast to discuss the Blue Jays and his Slack story?
What's his? Oh, the Slack story.
Yeah.
Man, if we gave Coburg Papa the mic, he could tell a lot more stories than just that.
Oh, I think that sounds like a great idea already.
Yeah, I mean, look, we could do some programming maybe around Christmas time when we're usually trying to, do a bunch of episodes at once. Plus, presumably, I'll be in the same place as him where we could facilitate that. Maybe it'll happen if the spirit's out there. Why not? But yeah, Coburg Papa, I can tell you, he always jokes with me. He's not 100%er. He's 110%er because he's listened to a few episodes more than once. So he'll be one of the first people hearing this answer once we release the show today. And yeah, I think he'd be up for it. I've never asked him. We've never really talked about it, but he would have some stories to tell, my friend.
I would pay a lot of money to hear story time with Coburg Papa and CJ just like annotating each story.
Yeah, we've been lucky. I mean, honestly, so much of our bond is built around sports too, right? So it's kind of fitting with the podcast. My dad's a big sports fan. And we've had a lot of cool moments together. Honestly, going to the World Series together was one of them. Yeah. And so, it was, we're lucky to still have the chance to do that. And that we got in the building that night, even though that was one of Yamamoto's, we didn't know it at the time, one of his 3 victories in the series for the Dodgers. But results aside, it was a good time. And I mean, he once let me go to the MLB All-Star game as a 9-year-old in an era when there wasn't cell phones with a stranger. I mean, it was a different time, but yeah, we've got some stories to tell.
And lastly, from the call out that I put up on X, I've had a few people just asking, "Hey, so are the Ottawa Senators going to do anything?" Of course, because it's me putting up that question. There's going to be Sens stuff. So
why don't you answer it? What do you think?
Are they? I mean, I think they'll do something by the deadline, but they want to know from you, CJ. Of course.
Well, I mean, it's no secret they'd like to. It's just. I guess that's where we're getting at is, and I understand the impatience. Like if you're a fan and maybe you're focused on one part of the lineup, you're like, oh, that's a hole. We got to address that. But at least I'd say to you this, if you're specifically a Senators fan in this case, it's not as though every other team's out there trading for the players you'd like to see your management group, add. It's tough to make trades. It's going to be a weird year. They've made some changes to the CBA. With things like even having a playoff salary cap might affect the kind of moves teams make because they're worried about what that might look like. Not having the double retention on salaries, which isn't necessarily something that would impact the Senators as much as, some other teams out there. But, I think it's going to be a difficult year for any team to make trades. Now, there's still going to be trades. There's going to be incentive to do it. Look at some of the teams that are having success right now. How are they doing it? They've stockpiled draft picks and made a lot of picks and gotten prospects and taken the time it takes and shifted things around. I mean, there's the obvious teams like Utah, who we've mentioned on the pod, or, even the California teams. Obviously, San Jose's been kind of in that mode for a few years and they're getting some more wins. Chicago, even the Columbus Blue Jackets, right? Who had a really nice year last season, got to the last weekend of the season with a chance to make the playoffs, and they're putting some wins in the bank so far this year, although they had a painful loss Sunday on Long Island, giving up 2 late goals. But, they did it by and large by trading players away and stockpiling picks. So that is always going to be tempting for teams, especially in a world where the free agent market doesn't look like it's going to be bearing much fruit. But also, there's a lot of teams still in it. Look at the standings. How many teams are we confident are totally out of it? It's a very small list. So I guess all those things are being balanced at once. In Ottawa, they're motivated to grow on what that team was last season. And I think that they're looking at a bigger type of trade. I mean, look at the guys they brought in last year, right? I think of the Zetterlund deal, obviously Dylan Cousins, those trades are made. They were meant to help the Senators of last season, but those are longer term types of moves, younger players you're bringing in. They traded away, Josh Norris. Like that's a big decision for an organization. You've developed a player and, you have to give up something to get something. So I think that they're still in the market for those types of trades, which those can be exciting ones, but they're also difficult ones to pull together and you need a lot of things to line up to make it happen.
Yeah, I still think and on top of that too, I think Steve Staios has shown that he'll make some deft moves if needed. I still think they need something on that left side. They don't have any other NHL defensemen beyond Shabbat, Sanderson, and Tyler Clevin on that left-hand side. I would expect them to make some kind of depth move because they had Donovan Sabrango as an extra who played, gets put on waivers. The Florida Panthers get him. There's a hole missing there. They barely have guys with pro experience down in the minors who are able to fill that up. So I think they're going to make a move in that area before deadline. Absolutely.
Makes sense. It makes sense. And you know, sometimes every team you have to remember is like a work in progress. You know, even the Jays made a bunch of deals at the deadline last year. That's just kind of how sports go. There's like phases of the season. This is the early part. No team's lineup that they're rolling out right now that makes the playoffs is going to have the same lineup, you know, come whenever it is, April 15th or whenever we get going. So, you know, there's a process at play there. And I think the Senators, they're at least, look, they're in the spot. Remember where you were a year ago or 2 years ago? They were always trying to take the step. They took the step. I think now they want to even be even better. So the motivation is high.
Absolutely. Great work as always, CJ, especially considering the circumstances of the last few days. You did very well.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, I told you. I mean, look, I think I found the right place for it all. I'm still a little bummed. Not trying to pretend that didn't hurt or that. I mean, that left a mark in the moment. It was agony watching those last few innings. But I mean, I can smile about it because I just love sports so damn much. Like it's cool to even get that wrapped up into something. You know, I even met strangers the night of Game 7, like just had great conversations with people. Like it was honestly amazing, every part of it except for the ending. And, you know, someone's got to lose. That's just how it goes. You know, there's Phillies fans at 93 when I was a little kid jumping around in my buddy's basement with all my, like literally there's a group of like 7 or 8 of us kids. We all played hockey together at the time, watched that 93 Jays World Series win. And we had a big pile up in my buddy's basement. And, you know, it was such an exciting time for us. I mean, there was a Phillies fan on the other side of that, right? And obviously many of them, and kids our age that probably had to live with that until the Phillies went on and won the World Series. Was it 2008? Did they win their next World Series?
They beat the Rays in that year. Yes.
You know, I guess my point is this is the cycle of life. I've had to be, when I was on the winning side as a Jays fan, I wasn't thinking too much about the losing end. So, you know, hat tip to Dodgers fans. I know I was poking you on social media, but I was just getting wrapped up in loving my team.
Yeah. Well, it's going to sting, but I really appreciate your perspective on this, Siege. And I think a lot of Jays fans will too.
A small piece of news I think coming this week is with David Camp for the Leafs and you know, been some focus on him. It does seem at this point like he's headed towards having his contract terminated. You know, not 100% done, but you know, he did leave the Marlies over the weekend and was thinking about his future. And, you know, I think he's ultimately in a spot like we saw Brandon Saad last year, you know, where he had a deal in St. Louis terminated, ends up signing with the Vegas Golden Knights, re-upped with them in the summer. You know, it happened with Connor Sheary in the offseason. You know, he, you know, had his deal with the Tampa Bay Lightning terminated, you know, went to camp with the Rangers on a PTO and signed a deal there. You know, the path back to the NHL for David Kampf, you know, likely involves the same set of things happening because, you know, he's an NHL player. But, you know, he finds himself with the Marlies to start this season. He makes too much money for most teams to think about bringing him on. And so, you know, we'll see where things end up with unconditional waivers on Monday, and Tuesday, but wouldn't surprise me at this stage if we talk about him kind of taking a bet on himself, you know, having his deal terminated and then becoming a free agent and seeing what other options might be out there for him.
Wow. Was that the news story you were chasing at the end of last pod?
It's been in the air for a few days. But, you know, I may be jumping the gun a little bit by mentioning it now. There's still a world it doesn't happen, but my sense is that's where it's going. Okay.
All right. Siege, again, great work as always. Thank you to everyone who tapped into today's show. tune in later this week for another new episode of The Chris Johnston Show, and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. Thanks so much for listening.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.